first time.
Well,
It's a lot better than
it's an honor to have Pastor Tracy Reynolds in here beside me. We spent so much time together regularly over these last 14 years. It's been wonderful. And one of the things I've enjoyed the most about my 14 years of working here is time with people, time with students. That's just what I love to do. And just the meetings I've had today have been like, yes. But also time with other faculty and staff, and especially Pastor Tracy. God has connected us. And so one of the things we want to talk about today is how spiritual formation, you've heard me use this phrase, I will repeat it often, intentionally. Spiritual formation is not something that is just to be done in the singular, but it is to be done in the plural. Often in our understanding of prayer and Bible study, it is just me doing that, and that is important. And the more I'm willing to do it, the more likely I am to pursue other people helping me do that. But if I don't have other people in my life to help me, then I'm living in isolation, and that is not good. So, Pastor Tracy, again, thank you for our relationship. Thank you for our friendship. And so let's just gossip about ourselves first, and then we'll broaden it and talk about relationships with other people. But talk about some parts of how our relationship was so much deeper than just two people that work at the same place in a geographical location.
Well, I think that's a byproduct of spending time together, not just in formal settings. Honestly, I met Chris when I think he had spoken here one morning, and I heard you speak, and I just went up and spoke. Probably just said something like, "I'm so glad you're here," or something like that, and how much I got out of the time we had. But you never meet somebody and you just know that if you lived a little closer, you would be friends. We might have even said that. It might not be the first time that I saw him, but there have been a couple people, probably 5 or 6 in my life, that I would just feel that way about. You met them, you just kind of wish you lived closer because you just know you'd be tight. And it's rare that you have a chance for that to happen. Then when Chris actually ended up coming here as campus pastor, I was one of those that was a vehement yes, because I felt like it's what we need. So I think because our relationship started in less than a formal way, we were friends before we were colleagues. That's helpful. But even if you're colleagues, there was a time in ministry where, and I think it's a fallacy, honestly, where it was like there had to be this healthy distance. Sometimes in the professional, the business world, you'll be told, you need a healthy distance between you and the people that are maybe lesser down the pecking order from you, the people that you maybe they report directly to you or something. I don't believe that.
Right.
I just don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed to work with people who I have relationships with. You need to know that my pastors are my friends. And so it was just not a foreign thing for us to become friends. Practical things, like Chris and I he's a Georgia Tech fan. How can my best buddy be a Georgia Tech fan?
He loves me anyway, though.
I was pulling for Georgia Tech on Saturday because it's important to him. That's pretty cool. I know it's almost wrong, isn't it? No, because it didn't mean beans to me. I do like the coach, by the way. But Braves, dude, we're all about that together. Music, worship. The more I got to know him, I just realized that we had a lot of common friends, a lot of common interests, but there was just deeper than that. When you get past the superficial things, you realize that here's somebody who understands me and loves me anyway, by the way. And so I think being able to, the weird part, I was a little bit concerned, I don't know if I've ever told you this. When I became the vice president for student development, one of the things I was a little bit concerned about was the fact that I was going to be his boss. And I didn't want that to mess up our relationship. And we may have briefly talked about that, but I don't think it did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I didn't feel that very long because we just, I can have conversations with Chris about things that I couldn't say to the team of people that were the executive leaders in that, the directors in that group. I had 2 levels. I had directors, and then I had the rest of the team, the 15. And Chris is in both those meetings. But there were things that I would talk about with Chris that I wouldn't talk about with the other 4, and certainly not with the other 15. And I think Jesus, I mean, I'm not, to the extent that we're like Jesus, Jesus said Peter, James, and John, and then there were 12. And I think there were different conversations. I think that he had conversations. If you just read in the book of John, a conversation that Jesus has with John and Peter that are really direct. He's Peter, it's none of your business what John does. There was always this, they had very specific relationships. I don't need 5 best buddies, but I need a couple folks in my life that love Jesus and love me enough to be honest with me. And Chris has definitely been that. It's been 14 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well,
that's a hard one.
Yeah, but it's so important because we see so many people, and you and I both talk to a lot of people who are in ministry or are in other careers, and they're living in the singular. They are living in isolation. Often because they've had relationships in the past, they were hurt, so never going to take that risk again. And I just want to challenge you guys. We are the body of Christ. We are all created in God's image, and we are not to live in isolation. We are to have people around us. Whatever vocation you plan to go into, I want you to see that as a priority, that you're going to have people traveling beside you. You can have people who will walk with you in that journey. So, Tracy, one of the things that has been important to me is this balance of, now I want you guys to listen to this because it's very important. I want you to have both pieces of this holy puzzle. I want you to have both pieces of these working in your life, where we had planned, organized time that was scheduled and consistent. But then we could just walk past each other and talk for 3 minutes before we go on to the next meeting. And that's how our relationship with God should be, where we have planned, organized time that we're going to pray and study the Word. But you guys know, I mean, what we emphasize in this class, that wherever we are, whatever we are doing, we're in dialogue with God. And we can add a relationship that we have become close friends with someone else who's speaking into our lives. And that text message that Tracy's going to send me is just what I need to hear at that moment. So as you look back on, your life and your years of ministry, how important is it to understand both of those? We're going to plan it and schedule it and be consistent. But let's be open to whenever there's a need for dialogue. Talk to us about those areas, Tracy.
2 levels. The first is, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about the time that we have with Jesus. I have a regular time with the Lord. I think that it's a scheduled time. I heard somebody just talking about getting up early, and I'm also get up about 5. It's 5 o'clock every day. And then the first face I want to see in the morning is not myself. It's not my wife. It's Jesus. And it's quiet. And so I get up and have time. It's always the same routine. I got my coffee. I got my Jesus. I got my, I'm typically having another, I read. I don't get as much time with Chris, so it's helpful. I read his last book. That's what I'm reading right now, the poetry, and I'll read usually a couple poems a day. Sometimes I'll tell you what I read, because that's a typical day. And then I journal. I journal on my iPad, and it was a student about, I guess it was a year and a half ago, Amanda Futrell, girl that I honored this morning. That we were in class one day, and I said, something I used to do a bunch of this was journaling. And I said, I want to do this again. I asked the little class of 4 students to hold me accountable to that. She texted me, I was on a Friday. She texted me like at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Thank God I downloaded Evernote, and I was learning how to use it when she texted me. And she said, because I told her, I said, ask me how the journaling's going. She said, PT, how you doing today? How's the journaling going?
Ooh, love it.
I don't think I've missed 3 days.
That is so good.
Since that day. Seriously. So I have a set time for that. Now, God's not going to fall off the throne if I don't do that. That's not the point. But if I have that regular time, then I think that it makes me more prone to be attentive to the Lord when he does choose to speak during the course of the day. Because I think Jesus went from place to place to place playing. Place to place to place praying. I think you know what I meant to say. He probably played too, but he was praying. He didn't have to excuse me, Chris, I'm going to go here and pray in the corner. No, he just stayed plugged in to the power source and it was like he just always had this hotline to the Father. But it was Jesus that would get up a great while before day and go off to a solitary place and there pray. That was, and the scripture says that was a habit he had. And that wasn't the first time they'd been to the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he died. That was a common place that they went a lot. They went to Bethany together. And I think it was have you seen any of The Chosen? You guys watch any of that? Oh my goodness. Let me challenge you. What I love about that, The Chosen it was an app last year. I think it's 8 episodes. It's the gospel told from the perspective of the people who were around Jesus. And it's very personal. They actually have personalities. Imagine that. Because I think we read the Bible, they don't have personalities. Well, when Jesus said that the number one command is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, and he basically left us in charge of this operation called the church and moving the gospel forward. And his exit plan was he left. But he left us the Holy Spirit, but he said, no, and he taught people in pairs and just sent them out to do stuff together. I mean, answer this for me. Paul and blank.
Silas.
Paul and
Barnabas.
Paul and
Timothy.
Paul and probably go to the end of any of his letters, and you're going to find a list of people that he's greeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Point well taken, right? It was all about these relationships that he had with people, and they didn't do ministry alone. Jesus sent people out in twos. Now, if I'm not better than that, I'm thinking I probably need that worse than anything. So time with Jesus and then time with other people. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 17 years old, after being in the church forever and ever and ever. I knew a lot about God, but I didn't really know God. I decided I was going to follow God in a very intentional way. And my youth pastor became my friend before he was the one who introduced me to Jesus. And then from that point forward, I learned a lot about Jesus through my friendship with Frank. As a matter of fact, I would tell you that Frank and Jesus look a lot alike. Oftentimes the voice of Jesus sounds a lot like my wife. Follow what I'm saying? Oftentimes the voice of Jesus sounds like Chris Maxwell. What am I saying? God speaks to us through his word, but he also speaks to us through the people that he has honestly gifted us into our lives. I was in a class here on campus on Zoom on Tuesday, and one of the students is really struggling with trusting other people. Now, there's a story behind that, a painful story, I promise you. One of the things if I could rewrite the script, I would love to sit down across in a Starbucks with a cup of coffee, and you can have your water and your blueberry muffin.
That's right.
All right. Or we could, anyway, and just hear your story, because there's always a story there. With that, behind this pain, behind this thing of not, there's somebody's burden to trust. There's some tough stuff there.
Yeah.
But I know that God wants more for us than that. But man, if I'm not, I want you when you leave Emmanuel to be in that aspect ruined. Because I was ruined in my first year following the Lord, that I had to have some people who were speaking, love Jesus and love me enough to tell me the truth. You follow what I'm saying? Because I'll tell you something. Chris knows me. Probably my wife knows me better than anybody, but Chris is not too far behind. There are things I've told him. He knows about me. There's some things I don't have to say. 2 weeks ago, after Debbie came home from the hospital, I saw him in the parking lot. And he didn't have to say a word. He looked different. The last times I had talked to him or seen him, there were several times, there were days, but I didn't hear from him. That's not like Chris. And I knew. I was concerned. I was praying for him. I was praying for Debbie. He was concerned. But then when I saw him, man, it was just like there was light back in his eyes, there was joy in his heart, and that made my week. That didn't make my day. I knew that day that Debbie was going to be okay. I knew about faith before that, but there was just something different. Yeah, you can put a price tag on that, guys. That's huge. 14-year price tag, right? I know him well enough to know, just looking in his eyes, and he knows that's reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. Well, I want us to tell a few stories about our time together. So think of some good stories, and then you guys will be asking some questions also. Part of your assignment will be you're going to write about 4 key points you've learned from this conversation. So that's going to be the 4 right there. There'll be 4 key points. So if you need to be writing anything down, but don't get distracted, anything. But we'll be sending this video to you. But for me personally, I would love every year Pastor Tracy and I would go to Accelerant, and we would travel together. Tracy would drive, I would ride, we would listen to music, we would talk sports, we would talk Emmanuel, we would talk scripture, we would talk dreams and hopes and wishes, we would ask each other open-ended questions for honest dialogue. I don't like to ride in a car very far. I mean, I love to get on a plane and take that ride. I'm not a get in the car and go for hours kind of person. I mean, 2 hours is sort of my limit. But we didn't count the time. That did not matter. Traffic would not have mattered. It was it was not just a ride. It was a conversation. It was an experience together, and we had already had a type of revival before we got to the location where that would be, on stage and in services. Who is there in your life that you are beside? I've talked before. Who is the Paul that is leading you so you can be the Timothy? Who is your Barnabas that you can be like Paul and have somebody right beside you? And who is the Timothy that you can be the Paul of and speaking into them? You did that right after class the other day, and so that's what many of you can do. You can speak into, and Tracy and I were just very different giftings and personalities in a lot of ways, but similarities too. And we know each other so well. He knows when it's time for me to eat, and he knows what I'm going to eat. I'm predictable in that way. But think of a story, Tracy, that is just moving from these are things we need to do, but this is how it worked for us in a practical way. And then you guys be thinking of some questions that you can ask us.
Well, one of the things that it's funny that's the ride up there. I look forward to that, and it was almost like, and I probably have taken times where I would just, but I know I'm going to have this from Thursday to Saturday or Sunday time, and we're going to hang together. It was a lot of walking because we would just get up early in the morning and take these long walks in the cold. And it's so funny because we would conversationally pray, but the thing is, the conversation got intertwined into the prayer time. So we might be in the middle of a prayer sentence and break out in some stupid country song that the sign over there reminded you of, but it just didn't matter. It's like, nobody's judging that. I remember we would usually make this trip in the daytime, and in the daytime you see where you're going. Well, one time we had to leave late, and probably my schedule, I don't know what the deal was, but we rode up there. I wasn't real sure how to GPS. Well, the GPS is great while you've got internet. But it always goes out in places where you don't know where in the world you are. It's usually some remote place. So, we're not paying attention. I'm just driving, letting GPS mama tell me where we're going next, right? So it says turn left and then 30. I just do that. And Chris is not paying any attention to that, right? So I got off this exit, and I'd never been down this road before. And we took a left turn, and dude, you could almost hear the songs from Deliverance start playing in the background, you know, and it is pitch dark, and there was, it had snowed there a couple of days before that. You could see nothing. It was foggy. It was dark. And this little road got smaller and smaller and smaller. It seemed like you were on a dirt road part of the time. I'm going, GPS is taking, I have no idea. And I could have turned around and gone back to save my soul. And I remember we came around this one corner, and you're seeing deer, and you're seeing, you think the bears. You know, if we break down out here, you don't dare stop. You know, like waiting to see a moonshine still. And then we drove, it seemed like it was like half an hour on this road. It probably wasn't more than 2 or 3 miles, just pig trail to pig trail to pig trail. And finally we get this thing, take a right, and boom, you're right back on the main drag. I had no idea. I think we've actually done that during the daytime, but in the dark, we got to laughing. Just, you know, it was late. We had no idea where we were, and we could have broken down the side. It was cold. There was still remnants of snow out there. But I think about those times and the stupid conversations and the things that we said, and I'll never forget that trip because it was like, we have no idea but it was like in the middle of that, I said, isn't this cool? We're just kind of out here, who cares? If we were to break down, I can't call anybody. I would not know which direction to walk to, and I'm not sure I'm going to go knock on any of these doors. But this doesn't matter.
We were together, and as we would discuss life situations, the past and hopes for the future, as we would pray together, and I love those times when we would walk, and it's freezing cold, we're hoping it's going to snow, but we're praying for the services going on, we're praying for our students at Emmanuel, we're praying for our personal lives. I would pray, he would pray, and then as he said, sometimes we just say, just stop and look at this. I mean, some of the places we walked, it is so beautiful. Who is there in your life that you can walk with, talk to God with? That is so important. All right, some questions from you guys.
How much time do we have? I have a question about, you know how you were saying with the whole equal level people. I have a pretty good handle on having girls around me in my inner circle to pour into me equally. And I have a mentor to pour into me. I have a question about me pouring into people, not under me, but however you would say that. Because a lot of times, and I guess this is kind of personal, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to feel like if I'm the only Jesus people see, then I feel like I need to pour into everybody I meet, every single person, all of my teammates, and put up so many people on my own shoulders that I have to take care of. How do you balance that with the stress? Because it is kind of stressful. Because do you just choose one Timothy? You just choose one person to pour into, like for instance, college. Being practical, I only have 4 years, so I'm thinking if all I have is 4 years, then I need to have a person a semester, a person a year that I'm intentionally pouring into. But then I feel like there's so many people who need what I feel like I have because of Christ, obviously not because of me. But it's like, do you choose one person and just be dedicated and say, I'm going to meet with you and I'm going to pour into you? Or do you have a few people that you just speak into when you think about it and pray about them when you think about it? You get what I'm saying? Because there's just so many people.
It's a great question. I'm going to give you, it was a big day. I was a youth pastor for 18 years, and that was the deal. Deciding, I don't think Jesus spent equal time with the people that he was around. And the problem with that is there's always going to be somebody who's going to be jealous about that. I don't know, maybe even your parents, they don't probably spend equal time with everybody. It just doesn't work out that way. There might even be, you relate more to your mom than your dad, and you have, and then another sibling does different ways. But in a sense, you do both. Okay, as a youth pastor, we'll put me back in that role, I'm going to spend some time with everybody. And like if I have had a regular practice of going to the high school just to hang out with them, okay? And while I was there, and literally I would go there at like 11 o'clock and I'd stay till 1:30 because that was their lunch period. And I did that every Wednesday. The students knew I was coming. I was at Oconee County High School because that's where most of my kids were from. I had some from another school, but I didn't try to go to 5 schools. I went to the one that was in closest proximity. And every week I had to get permission to do that. I showed up, and basically, if you were to walk up to me in the hall and say, well, PT, hey, what are you doing here? I said, I came to see you, man. Then we get 5 feet down the classroom, and then Senator Ben looks over and says, hey, PT, what are you doing? I said, I came to see you, man. Jason, well, what? I thought you came to see me. I said, I didn't came to see you and you. But the deal was, that was the truth. I came to see you and all your other friends there. If you try to talk about Jesus, I know the rules. We're not going to go there. No, we're going to talk about something else. But I'm there for you. I'm equally available to those people, but I couldn't be equally available to everybody. I can't mentor 10 people, 12 people, 20 people. I don't think it was an accident that Jesus did have Peter, James, and John that he poured into. There were 70 at another level that he had relationships. Think about 120 in the upper room. There were big crowds, big other numbers. You get 4,000 and 5,000, and they all had some piece of Jesus. But Jesus was intentional about zeroing in for the 3.5 years. Remember how long it was. For about that 3.5 years, he poured into those 3 people more than he did the other 9. And there probably was bickering about that among the 9. I can imagine going, Peter, James, and John. I'm so sick of hearing about Peter, James, and John. Because they're people. Second or third year of my student ministry, I was arrested by 2 Timothy 2, verses 1 and 2 says, you then, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. This is Paul talking to Timothy. And he says, and the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will be qualified to teach others. So it's Paul, Timothy, faithful men, others. 4 generations, if you're going to be particular about it, of potential disciples there. 4 different levels of relationships. He said, you then, my son, real tight relationship, be strong in the graces in Christ Jesus. The things you've heard me say, with a lot of people around, entrust to a handful of people who will also entrust to a handful of people. And it just keeps going on. When Jesus would say, go and as you're going, make disciples, I think that's the crux of what he was saying. He would say, weigh in, make yourself available to the big numbers at a certain level, but then reserve those special times, those dedicated times, those concentrated times, those regular times for a handful. When I say handful, I don't mean 5. I mean less than this. Probably for me, it might, I don't know that I'm as good as Jesus. There are 2 guys that I have really close relationships. One is 45 years, and the other is 15 years. But at this point in time, my closest friend's sitting by me right now. And then I have Terry, and I have to have regular time with them. And we've had to renegotiate this time. It's not easy when you change a position. And that was probably, for me, the saddest part of this entire thing was realizing that there's not a Thursday goes by that I don't note the hour of 9 o'clock. Why do I note the hour of 9 o'clock? Because that was the hour I spent with Chris. That's the truth. I'm not lying. I almost never go by Thursday that I don't think about that. And either I pray for him, there have been times I've texted him that time, same from him. I don't always say what to do, but I don't have to tell him that, he knows. That didn't happen accidentally. It's just part of who I am. I made dedicated time with those, and so the prayer for me is real so simple, I'm almost embarrassed to share it. It's like, God, who are the handful of people that you want me to pour my life into? That's a regular prayer I pray. Who are the handful of people that you want me to pour my life into? Let me tell you where I am now. Okay, soon I'm not going to tell you something I'm not trying to practice. I work at a church right now. Down the hall from me are 2. One is an SCM graduate named Gabe Eason. You guys know Gabe. Well, I'm a mentor in Gabe's life. He's down the hall from me for a reason. We put him there because I have high accessibility. I'll see Gabe sometimes 10 times a day, sometimes 2 times a day. But it's not uncommon for right here. PT, you got a minute? Every day. That's part of the deal. It's an informal role, but it's also a formal role. Next door down is another SCM graduate, Callie Trombley, Sorrow Trombley. Those are people, they're 20-somethings that we talk about life. They're helping me do it. She's helping me doing ministry. But we have regular times together. Right now it's less structured because I'm so accessible. But when Amanda, the girl that we honored today in SCM Chapel, on Fridays, I would spend an hour every Friday for a season. There was at least a semester, maybe a semester and a half. And I remember when she met her now husband, when Calvin, it was kind of like she wanted my approval of Calvin. She didn't say it that way, but that's what she wanted. So I met her over at the coffee shop, and he had a cool Jeep. I think it was yellow or something. And anyway, we had this, but the whole point was we developed this relationship that was different. I met with John this morning, John Campbell. He's another one that we have regular time with. It's not accidental. And I would just make weekly time for not everybody, but a handful of somebody's. And I'm figuring out now kind of who those people are in church world. I know that two of them, and there's another guy named Scott that I think. And then there's a group of 5 guys that I do a year with, where we spend time together once a month and read a book together and pray for each other, memorize scripture, and do a project for our marriage called Radical Mentoring. And there'll be 5 of them and a co-leader myself, and we'll walk through that for a year. I'm just finishing up next Tuesday the second group of those. I'll start another one in January. Again, I'm praying about who are those people. I don't want you to try to duplicate my life, but I just want you to catch it. There's a pattern there, and it's not random. There's intentionality there. You don't have to be 62 to do that. I think, who are the 1 or 2 people that you can weigh in somewhat heavily there? They would have to want it. There's got to be some affinity. There's got to be some level of time commitment. And when I say regular, it doesn't have to be weekly. But that's always best if you can do weekly. Yeah. But it's not always possible to do weekly. So, and once you've done weekly as long as Chris and I have, I cannot see him for a month. I don't want to, but I very quickly feel like I'm caught up with I know where he is. I feel like I just put a pause and start the next sentence, and there we go. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question? Mm-hmm. In a long way?
Good. I have kind of a sub-question. I don't want to take up these things, go asking questions.
No, is that relevant to anybody? I mean, you guys, we all have a sphere of influence. It's not relevant? Is our No, but does this make sense? I mean, because that's a tough question, because you're going to have more people that are going to want a piece of you, and you can't do that with everybody. I guess you just kind of have to get okay with that.
And sometimes it's good to talk specifically about that to another person who's helping you, someone who's mentoring you. Show them your schedule. Show them just kind of have an outside view of those students that are to be the ones walking along beside you. I think that would be good. Continue the question. Let's help the dialogue.
And so if I am mentoring a person, do they need to, like you were saying, they need to kind of be in on it? Or just maybe on the outside, kind of pour into them here and there, encouraging them? Or do I need to say, hey, would you let me mentor you? And
I don't like that word.
Right. Because that makes me uncomfortable, because the second part of my question is, I'm not any better than anybody else.
No.
So, but when you establish, like, hey, can I pour into you? Then it makes me seem like I feel like I'm on a level above you, and then we're not able to be like girlfriends anymore. It's almost like I'm Jesus to them, and I don't want it to be like that. How do you make sure that you don't? You get what I'm saying? How do you make sure you don't put yourself on a pedestal, even though I want to pour into her, whoever she is? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep. I think it starts out with probably, for me, I'm just real practical. If I think that the Lord may be speaking to me about somebody, typically there's already a little bit of a level of interest there, and I'm just kind of, maybe we'll just go have coffee and we just talk and just kind of hear each other and just learning to ask questions and just follow that up with more questions, just to find out more about them, and just because you're trying to understand. And I think rather than use the verbiage of mentoring, I think what we're looking for is we just want to have a prolonged conversation. We just want to walk together and do some life together. If they can just get together and just say, look, if it's officially mentoring, I just say, listen, man, I'll tell you what Gabe does. Gabe brings me questions. Gabe will write a question down on his phone, dictate something in, and he'll bring me his questions. He's very organized. Now, for some people, that's the way you'd want to do it. I might do that from time to time. That's not normally how I do it. But I have gone. Other times I had 3x5 cards or something out, and I would write down, if I knew I was going to have time, I'd write down those things. Chris always takes notes. So that's how he lives. I appreciate that. That tells me that you value my time and you've thought about that. Think about it. You've already you've given thought to the time we're going to have together. When I say I don't like the word mentoring, it's for the reasons you said. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like somehow it's like I don't think I'm any of that. The only difference between me and you is I've been doing this a little bit longer. That's about it, isn't it? And hopefully, I think they can pick up on that from you. You don't project airs of superiority. And if I do, I need somebody to tell me about that.
Yeah.
But but I think if you keep your heart that pure and you just look for ways to disarm that and make it. I asked a guy one time to be my mentor, and I freaked him out, and he told me no, and it hurt my feelings. I'm a grown man. I'm 40 years old. I did that. Can I tell you, it hurt my feelings? I ducked him for several years. Chris knows what I'm talking about, because I told him the story. And it's only been in the last 10 years that I feel like I actually have a peer-to-peer relationship. But I think it was that word. I asked him, but what I wanted, I just want to hang out with him. That's all. Let me ask you some questions. Mm-hmm. Is that helpful at all?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. It is better to not have the shirt on with the title. I am your mentor.
It's not a position.
Like in writing, show, not tell. But there does come a time and a place where you make sure it's okay that they want honest transparency and some accountability, and that's good. That can be a healthy relationship, healthy friendship.
One of the pieces on that, Chris, is that I think we earn the right to be heard. Like, I'm looking around this classroom, and I've got different levels of, I have almost no relationship with you two guys, because I don't really know you. And that's nobody's fault, right? But I think, after I've spent just a little bit of time in here in class, and whatnot, particularly if I heard more of your hearts, we'd leave with a different level of understanding. There's a little bit of trust there. I've been in a small group with you, getting to know you. Definitely had you in class already, and you have seen around. But there's, you know what I'm saying? But there's different levels of trust, different levels of, John Maxwell calls it change in your pocket, that people grant you change, and the change represents trust. And if you hang with people, the more information that you share, you gain more trust, and you get more change that you can spend in those relationships. If you'll make a tiny withdrawal, if you make a mistake, you might lose a little change. But if you do something cool and you make them feel good, that you get more change. And so you kind of got this deposit system going on. But we kind of earn the right to go deep with somebody. And there are times when I wouldn't dare, even if I thought I had a piece of information, I might not yet share it with you, but I probably would say it to Ben. Yeah. I'm saying, because I feel like I'm a little further down the road relationally. And the only difference is time, and maybe some time together. Yeah, and I don't have a gauge for that.
Yeah.
It's more art than science, I think. I can't say, well, after so many hours and minutes, no, that's not that at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that mean earn the right to be heard? Does that make sense? Y'all agree with that?
Good. Another question. Anybody else? Tracy, you and I both have seen people, as I mentioned earlier, who have been hurt in relationships, and one of the long-term effects of that hurt is the refusal to enter a deeper relationship. I think it's been healthy for us to have a relationship where we're not going to let that happen to we will hold each other accountable. If I'm hurt in a different situation, I can come and talk to you about it. If you're hurt, you can come and talk to me about it. Who are you talking to right now in your life about your hurt? Who are you having an open, honest dialogue with? I've told you, we can be honest with God. You guys have been doing that in your journal entries. Y'all have done a great job with that. And then now we're seeing that happen in the classroom setting. But who are you sitting along with and having an open, honest conversation with? So they can ask you the hard questions. I think that's important.
So like after y'all have been friends for so long, what does accountability look like between you guys?
After we've been friends for so long, what does accountability look like? That's very good, and I think we both can answer it. Maybe we'll have a little different take on it. But, there were, just like last month, and you guys know what I was going through, with my wife being in the hospital, us not knowing what was going to happen. And Tracy would not only text me and ask me how Debbie's doing, and he wouldn't just say, "How are you doing?" he would really say, "How are you doing?" It wasn't just, our common hello, how are you, what's up? No, when Tracy says, "How are you doing?" to me, he wants to know, Chris, how are you doing? Are you getting enough rest? How are you dealing with your emotions? Call me if you need to. And to me, that was him just checking on me to see how I'm doing. And it wasn't it wasn't somebody who's mean and hateful saying, "You better be doing right." Not that at all. It's like somebody loving and caring with their arms reached out. "I'm here for you." And I sensed that from him. It was difficult when he said goodbye and no longer working here, because we worked so well together. We were there helping each other any way that we could. But we talked about it, and we would ask each other the honest, difficult questions that some people are afraid to ask. But to me, just that honest dialogue is what has done it. What are your thoughts?
I want to go back to that a month ago. That was an awkward time because Chris doesn't usually not respond. I told Lisa once, "Chris is in trouble." I haven't told you this. Because he was, he would respond. Don't take me wrong. There's a response and there's a response. There was a distance. And it wasn't like he was shutting me out. It was just, I just think he was having a hard time processing this because he was now having to be the caregiver and make decisions, and there was a lot of pressure. He had family in the house. Things were questionable. We really didn't know how severe this was going to be for Debbie. It was serious. But there was, and I don't know how long, it wasn't like days and days, y'all. I'm talking about 4 or 5 days. There was a period where it was kind of critical. And I would keep asking, he would never answer. He wouldn't give me more than how you say, "Hey, how are you?" And people say, "Fine." It was about like that. That's how it felt. Or he would just duck it. He would answer every other question but that. But he knows me so well. He knows I knew the difference. But he just couldn't. And it was hard to know how hard to push, because I didn't want to push him. And I don't remember when it was or what the context was. It doesn't really matter. But there was a point where I pushed one more time, and you actually told me how you. I don't remember what it was. It was something like, he would say, "Well, Aaron's doing this, and I got to hold the baby," and he'd tell me all this other stuff, and I go, "Yeah, but how are you?" And maybe tell me something else, and I would say, "Yeah, that's great, but how are you?" Do you remember that? Yeah. I go, "He's got the text, I can promise you." And by the way, we're not talking phone calls at this point. We're talking about text. That's sometimes early morning, and we've had some funny, crazy stuff. He sent me a song last Friday that, man, I listened to that. It just, I told him, I said, that needs to be the new national anthem. It was so good. I don't even know if I knew that tune or not. It was a Bob Bennett song, so good. Something joy. Outrageous joy, is that wrong? Strange joy? Strange joy. Whatever. Check it out. Bob Bennett, Strange Joy is a great song. but that's what friends do.
He's the one that did this song about baseball that I played for you guys.
Oh, I love that song. Yeah. So, I'd earned the right to push a little harder, I guess is what I'm saying. But even at that, I was trying to be loving. You know what? You want to give helpful help, and you just don't know. And